So, I saw this pretty interesting jewelry box on Instagram the other day. Wow! And I just fell in love with it. And I just knew I had to make one for my wife. It was quite a challenging build, but it's a good thing I love challenges. Let me show you how I made this thing happen.
Quote of the day: the greater the difficulty, the greater the glory. Marcus Cicero.
Let's start this mystery box with the easier part, cutting up the top and the bottom square to 20 by 20 centimeters. I used an 18mm plywood board for these parts. I was thinking of using that same 18mm plywood for the drawers or bins, but later I decided against that idea since it would make the boxes look so bulky and heavy. I had this 4mm plywood sheet available. It was pretty thin though, so I decided to beef it up by gluing up two sheets together. I clamped that down and left it overnight to set. For you, I would definitely recommend you just get a 9mm plywood board to avoid all this gluing stress. If this mystery box becomes a success, I'm definitely making a bunch more of these. I'm sure these ones will be a great seller. Let's get back to the build. I marked 12 centimeters from all the sides to find the center. Then I ended up drawing the lines to see where our box drawers will be. I set the table saw to 12 centimeters. Then I cut up 4 squares from that 8mm plywood that we just made. I don't know if you've seen any of my builds before, but I absolutely love making sure I visualize at every step of my build to make sure that I'm not making silly mistakes. From just eyeing my project, I wanted to be about 12 centimeters tall. I used this really simple method of building the box sides, cutting up all the side pieces to the same length of 11.1 centimeters. You'll see how simple it is when we get to the glue up part of this build. From that 8mm board that we made earlier, I cut up 4 of these 11.1 by 25 centimeter pieces. Since this was the last of that 8mm board that we just made, I had to make sure that all of the 16 pieces that I need to make those boxes come up from these boards. So I decided to cut up all the pieces to a width of 5.5 centimeters. Now, speaking of centimeters, I have a question for my American audience. I've noticed in the comments section in a couple of videos that it seems like metric is a bit hard or confusing for you guys. So I'm just thinking to myself like, what exactly could be hard? Because you just look at the ruler and it tells you exactly what you're looking at. It's 10 centimeters, 5 millimeters, that's all. I don't see what's the hard thing about it. But when it comes to imperial, now that one is a tricky one. So we get up to 64ths of an inch, 32nds of an inch, and so on. It's like I'm doing math. I'm just trying to figure out what's the length, not trying to do more maths. So that's my perspective of imperial. I'd really like to know, what is the difficult part or the challenging part on metric when you're trying to use it as an American or an imperial user? So that's been on my mind for a while. Just wanted to know your perspective of it. Anyway, with our pieces all cut up and sanded, let's get to gluing and nailing up these boxes. This is the simple orientation or method that we will be assembling the boxes. It's actually my first time trying out this method as well. I saw it and I thought it was intriguing, very simple, because you use the same length for all the sides. So you apply glue only to the part that is touching the baseboard and as well as the edge that will be touching the perpendicular board. Then you just repeat that process and then before you know it, you'll have your box complete. Let's leave those aside to dry up for a few hours as I recap on how exactly this mystery box is supposed to function. I don't have a router table yet, so I had to make one on the go. The video shows that we need a routed groove on each of these boxes in a clockwise orientation. I set up my fence to make a groove at 2 centimeters from the edge, then went on to set up a stop block to stop at 2 centimeters from the end of the box. Setting up the stop block was a bit tricky to get it 2 centimeters exactly. I'd suggest you use a test piece instead of doing what I did. I went straight on to the final product. Now that we are done routing the bases, it's time to apply the dowels at the 4 corners. So I made a mark at 2 by 2 centimeters of each of the corners. Then I drilled 8mm holes in all the 4 corners to half the depth of the board. Then we will need to put a dab of glue in all of the 4 corners, insert the dowel inside. I use this 4mm board to measure the depth that I want to cut it to, which is the same depth as the routed grooves that we have. So only after I had applied the dowels, I realized I had made my first mistake. I forgot to mark the center of this board. This is where we'll be drilling our 12mm holes. So I'd suggest that you make the markings prior to applying the dowels. So because of my silly mistake, now I have to try and clamp the boards together and drill from the top to the bottom board, which ended up giving me a crooked 12mm hole, but I ended up working with it anyway. As you can see, it looks out of square. So as you can see, I had to try and straighten that crooked hole by widening up that hole to try and make sure that it ended up being 90 at least. But this is nothing that a little bit of glue and a speed square won't fix. So I set that up and then let it dry up for a little while. Because we have that 12mm dowel in the center right now, we need to make a little bit of a wedge at the corner of the inside of those boxes so it can move easily. I decided to use a router instead of a sander compared to the video. Then we need to follow up and install the top of the box and cut off the excess dowel. So we are almost done right now. We just need to apply these nails anti-clockwise or to the right of the corner dowel of the box. Then you pre-drill and nail it in. Throughout this whole build, I have been so excited to get to this final part of the build where I get to try out this thing and see if it actually works. I didn't really believe it at first, but here we are. I pre-drilled the dowel and applied a screw. So I tested it a couple of times and it worked perfectly. I just wasn't a fan of the screw on the top, and also it had issues when I was trying to open it with one hand. It wanted me to hold the top and the base as well in order for it to open. But if I open with one hand, the whole thing moves. But worry not, I have some solutions. Firstly, for the top part, I felt like it needed a handle or a knob of some sort to open it in a central place. So I went to my local hardware and I found these cheap ovals for about 20 bucks. So they are about 5 centimeters tall and 9 centimeter circles. So it seemed a bit much, so I wanted to cut it in half, make it a bit less bulky. I clamped it in my Moxon Vice and I cut away with my Japanese pull saw. Could you do me a favor and just smash that subscribe button for me if you're enjoying the build? This really helps out small channels like mine a lot. Thanks. I drilled an 8mm hole in the center to help me centralize it on that 12mm dowel that we have. Then I applied some glue. With the weight of my drill, I just applied it on and left it there for a few hours to set. Then I came back later with an 8mm drill bit and drilled a bit deeper and inserted an 8mm dowel to connect the two. Then I sanded the top of the handle and rounded over the edges with a router bit. I decided to use a simple furniture wax finish for the whole jewelry box. For that issue of the whole box moving when I use one hand, I fixed that with the simple fix of using rubber pieces on the base of the box. I have so many improvements that I want to do to this box. This was just the prototype, so I definitely want to make way more than this, some with pattern plywood and so on. I believe these ones will be a great seller, especially around Valentine's Day, Mother's Day and so on. So would you want me to make other improved versions of this? If I get only just 5 comments saying you want it, I'll definitely make it. Make sure, hit that comment section right now. Here is an amazing impossible chair that I made recently. I'm sure you'll definitely love to click on that and watch it. Take care.